Hey guys, this is Tom Box, and welcome to a very special episode of MST.TV where we're going to learn to play like a YCS champion. And with me, I have one of the most special guests I've ever had on this channel. We have a YCS champion, the recent 250th title holder. We have Paulie Aronson. Welcome.
Howdy. How's it going?
I'm good. I'm glad that you took the time to come onto this channel. I'm really grateful. So first of all, thank you for coming on. But before we get started,
Sure.
I'm going to pass it off to you. Who are the shout outs that you want to give to?
So shout outs to all my friends who always support me, like the community. So mainly, my team, Luxury Gaming. They're awesome. Been with them like 5 years from the beginning. Shout out to my friend Brad. He's insane. He's like my master deck builder. Like we test together a ton for every event. Hani, he was the person I tested with the most for this event. Like so much insight that went into this event was from what I worked on with him. Shout out to my friend Joe Palmieri for lending me all the cards for the deck. Shout out to my friend Mike Zmitty for also lending me cards for the deck when I ruined the first ones by spilling a bottle of water on them in the middle of day two. So shout out to everyone, like all my friends who came together to help me recreate the deck the morning of day two. Barely made it to the table in time to even start playing day two, and ended up making it all the way. So it was an awesome day. Shout out to everyone who helped me out and supports me.
That sounded like a complete roller coaster for you on day two.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Okay, guys, the tie has come off today, and I'm not the commentator, Tom, and I'm not behind the desk, so I get to ask you some real hard question, and I think I want to get the secret sauce out of you. How do we play like a YCS champion? Hopefully by the end of this interview, we'll have some insight of how to play like a top-cut YCS contender. We want to improve our game, and who else to better ask than the current champion? But first of all, let's get to know you a little bit better. So, this is your second time taking a title. You went from, remote YCS champion to topping events. How are you feeling about, the journey?
It's been a great, it's been good. Like you said, I really loved the remote era. Before remote duels and like pre-2020, I used to not be able to travel a lot for personal reasons. So it was really cool when remote happened to finally be able to compete in like big events like consistently, without having to leave the house, because none of us could leave the house. And then I was able to start traveling recently last year post COVID and start going to more events, and it's been good to be able to finally start seeing success in person as well. And this last weekend was awesome. I never expected to be a one-time YCS champion, never mind two. So it's been cool.
It's incredible. Did you enjoy your time at the event? Like, what happened? Like, what's like your favorite story that happened at the event?
Probably. So probably just making it through the weekend, like not knowing where I was going to stay half the nights. Like I literally day two had like my suitcase like rolling around with me around the convention center. Morning of day two, 20 minutes before round 9 starts, or before round 10 starts, realizing that my bottle of water had opened up in my bag and literally destroyed all of my cards. And like I said before, all my friends who happened to be there with me came together, and in 20 minutes we dried off the cards. One of my friends lent me an entire another Kashtira deck core, a bunch of other, found the remaining cards I needed from other people who were in the vicinity and friends. I'm fortunate enough to know a lot of people who were supportive, willing to help.
Crazy. That's hella stressful.
Yeah, re-sleeved, put the whole deck together, literally I ran back and forth between the vendors and like around the room like for 10 minutes while everyone was sitting down for the round. I sat down, I think 9:01, like just in time for my round 10, and then proceeded to win out with one draw.
Wow, that is insane. I just can't believe that would like happen. That's like the worst case scenario. Going into day two, not having a deck ready.
Yeah,
it's kind of what happened.
Like, literally we're all standing outside the convention center with 20 minutes to go before the round, and I'm like, oh, this is like the worst possible time.
Shout outs to all the friends that really just help you pick everything up.
Yes.
Oh my god,
100%.
that is
like. It was unironically a community effort. Like, I literally couldn't have won this without all my friends.
It almost felt like that episode of Yugioh 5Ds where you say was in jail or something like that, and he basically built a deck from all the prisoners and to beat the prison guard.
Yeah, oh my god. Oh, don't know all that, but it was good. And then round 11, the second round of day two, we sat down and shuffled up, and then like we drew hands, and my opponent was like, I forgot to unside, and I was like, oh no. So, like, he drew a side card in his game where he realized he hadn't unsided after his prior match.
Okay.
And I was like, all right, just fix your deck and just redraw. Like, I don't care. Like, I try to play with good sportsmanship. So like, that's another story I want people to know. It's like, I want people to know that like, you can play with like good sportsmanship and like being kind to your opponents and not having to resort to sharking and stuff like that and still win. And I want like, so that's another story I wanted to share.
Man, that's like awesome. That's a really good sportsmanship. If it was like me or any other person, I think like, oh man, that's unfortunate, but I guess we'll just have to call a judge to get it fixed.
Those are the rules. So no disrespect to anyone who, if technically that is a game law. So don't take me saying that and say like, oh, you should do this for your opponent. Like that was my choice, and I fully respect whatever anyone else's choice.
That is a very, very respectable choice that you gave your opponent that chance, because you helped them wind down. Like they're super stressed already, going into the table, and all of a sudden they have to take an L just for like a mistake like that. But that's super nice of you. Like a lot of top cut players, it gets pretty ruthless. I've especially when people are on the bubble, they start to behave in the weirdest. I'm saying weird, but I'm really just censoring myself. They get a lot meaner. Like they become pretty mean people. Okay, but that's awesome. But I kind of want to ask you, like, so coming from remote YCS champion, there's like a lot of people have a little bit of like a stigma behind like, oh, you topped a remote event. Oh, that's not a real event kind of deal. What do you have to say to that? Like the difference between like playing remote events and like in person. Like,
well, my answer as to like the biggest difference, or really, it's just like more of a technical difference is like you have to be very deliberate with like your card placement and where your hands are, like be cognizant of where your hands are at all times, and just be careful with where you place your cards, because if you drop your hand, like you could get a game loss potentially, or if you like move some cards off screen, like you want to be very professional, make sure you keep everything visible at all times, and just be very deliberate with your shuffling and card placement and all that stuff. That's the only real difference. Aside from that, remote events, like I've always really enjoyed remote events. To me, like they're equally as competitive as in-person events, as long as like people play in them, which up to this point, fortunately, even the recent ones, like the December remote YCS was super competitive. The one Christian one was like one of the most stacked events. Like it was had a lot of good players playing it. So to me there's not much difference, but there were a few competitive players during COVID who were taking a break from the game, including Jesse. So there were a few missing, but for the most part, the community was still very competitive, and like it was still most of the same people playing and topping.
Honestly, Yu-Gi-Oh is Yu-Gi-Oh at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yu-Gi-Oh is Yu-Gi-Oh.
So here's now we're gonna get into some of your practicing regimen. So like, what do you do during playtest? How do we playtest like you? I feel like this is a bit of a trade secret among some of the best players around the world. They usually answer pretty vague. Oh, I just playtest with my team. I play a lot, and that's kind of the end of the story. But what do you do during your playtest, and like, how do you maximize the effectiveness of playtesting?
Yeah, let me think about that, because like it's interesting, because I do think like. Just as a broad meta answer, playtesting in general is so important. I value playtesting as it's the most important thing. I always tell people like the number one most important thing for improving at the game is just practice as much as possible. Going into an event, test as much as possible. And to be fair, there are a lot of competitive players who feel the opposite, who say that theory is more important than testing. I feel testing is more important than theory by a substantial margin, because at least I think like in the past, there's definitely an argument to be made that you could do a lot. You could accomplish a lot with just theory, just sitting and analyzing the potential field and decks and interactions. But the modern game has become so complex that like the level of complexity in the game is such that you can't possibly pre-imagine and like estimate every single interaction that's going to come up. Like you just can't theorize like, all right, if I play this card, like how is this card going to interact against this deck? Like there's so many different micro interactions because every card has so many effects now. Like and the game states are just so complex. You just can't analyze everything just with theory, and you just have to sit down and play test and just see what the interactions are. So to me, I'm all about like practice as much as possible, test every interaction, and not even just it's not even just for like testing cards, but just like even if you already had like a perfect deck list, like just practicing as much as possible so that you memorize every interaction, so that when a given situation comes up in a tournament, that you already know like what to do. Like for me personally, like I'm not good at coming up at like figuring out the correct plays on the spot. To some extent I am, but like I'll say overall, like I feel much more comfortable like just knowing going in like I've seen this interaction before, I've seen this situation before, and like knowing what to do. So I think just practicing as much as possible and testing is just super important. And to answer your question more specifically about, well, like, cause that's almost a separate question. Like, well, how do you test? I would say like one thing I like to do a lot, like me and my friend Brad, like I said, who's my main testing partner, we'll try test just as many repetitions as we can. All the matchups like between the meta decks, Sprite versus Cash, Cash versus Branded, Branded versus Sprite, like just get as many reps as possible. Sometimes we'll want to test specific cards, and then like, you know, I always say like, all right, I want to get at least like 3 to 5 at least games in with a particular card before making like a decision on whether or not I want to play that card. So just like test that particular card in like
do you
just a
hold
variety of game states.
the card like in the opening hand, just always have it, or like
yeah,
somehow
that's like
game,
that's definitely the most efficient way to test a particular card. Is just like draw four card hands with that card in the hand, and just like that's like a really quick way to do it. If you're short on time, like that's the best way to do it. We'll just sit down and like and when you play this I'll say this one. Some like a lot of like almost I feel more beginner players or more casual players like almost have like a stigma around like taking back plays when you're playtesting. Don't worry about that. Don't feel like, oh, I made a mistake, I gotta live with my mistake. No, testing is for experimentation. It's for like trial and error. It's for ideally you want to go over all the lines. Even if you didn't make a mistake, go back, try a different line, try every combination, try every version of the combo you can with your 5-card hand, especially if you're testing like a new deck. Like me and Brad, like, and all my pretty much the majority of competitive players who I test with, we always go back and like we discuss like, all right, oh shoot, like last phase I did this, maybe I should have done this, because if I did this you would have done that. We'll go back and like fix it and then try like a different line.
That's actually huge, because you're right, like there are a lot of like newer players that when they're playtesting, they're like, well, I guess I'll see where this bad line goes, and they basically never rewind to that point where things are different. But you get to see multiple timelines almost of like what would have happened, and
exactly.
That I think it's like really important.
Timeline.
Knowing how to playtest is like one of the key things, so that like you're not just like doing the same mistakes over and over and over again. And
exactly, like it's in a tournament setting when you're playing like on the clock, or if you're testing in a way similar to like some people say like, oh, like test with the clock. That can be useful to like practice for a tournament setting, but if you were to do all your testing, let's say like on a clock, you would never ever be able to fully like visualize and think through all of like the potential of your deck. It's just impossible to like figure out the exact correct line in every case, like while playing like with time in mind, trying to play it at a good pace. That's why like testing without a clock and just going through all the lines and all the situations and figuring everything out ahead of time is so important, so that like when you sit down under pressure on the clock, like you already done the work.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's nothing. Like take your time when you play test. Don't rush. Like think everything through. Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so thanks for sharing about, you know, playtesting. You know, learning how to playtest, I think, is like one of the most key things here, and yeah, you definitely like kind of gave us a lot of insight into that. So let's go into more of your specific choices within the 250th YCS. So what actually made you end up picking up Kashtira for the deck? And to kind of follow up with that, like what was your opinion of Kashtira at the time before the event?
So I've been playing Cash since I think I started playing Cash at Vegas. I mean, I tested it a lot for Mexico. We were during Terra format, but I ended up determining that for Mexico, Terra was still far and away the best deck. But I played it for Vegas, and I've played it since then. And it definitely like, it's so interesting because Cash is like, it's a deck that's like, it was the best deck, but like it was so weak for a best deck. Like it was such like, to me, like the difference between Cash and the other decks, it was a very like marginal ceiling difference, right? Like it wasn't like a dominant, it was a very beatable best deck, I feel like.
It's fragile.
That's a good word for it. Like there's certain cards like Nib and Evenly and Eclipse that just like there's no in-engine way to counter, really. Aside, like, well, the 5-zone lock can counter like Evenly and Eclipse, but it's hard to consistently do the 5-zone lock. I think I only did it like twice during the tournament. I only did it once with the full lock with Ariseheart and the 5-zone lock. The other game was a really specific game state where I didn't make Ariseheart and I ended on just like the 5-zone lock with several Backrow because I opened several pieces of non-engine, so I knew I could protect it. But normally you don't want to do the 5-zone lock unless you can also do Ariseheart, and it's hard to be able to always have the pieces to do that. And if they have one single hand trap, it takes every single extender in the deck to do the full 5-zone lock. So if they have a single hand trap, even like one Ash or one Imperm, even if you can play through it and still do like full combo, you can't actually do full combo because you need every single extender to do the 5-zone lock. So if they have one single hand trap, you don't have to do it. So it doesn't come up that much in my opinion. But,
so why did you pick up the deck for the event?
Right. So I like for the month leading up to the event, I tested like every single deck I could. Every single deck that was seeing some level of success, I wanted to try because I didn't want to play Cash for the event. It's such a flawed best deck. I would love to find something better. But in the end, like, I never really found anything. I think like Sprite was like the other best deck. Me and Hani tested like every single Sprite variant like the 2 weeks leading up to the event. We ended up kind of ruling them out one by one, except for Tri-Brigade Sprite, which is probably the deck that I think may have been the best deck for the event in hindsight. But I actually brought that deck with me. I brought that deck with me to the event, but I just knew I didn't have enough playtime with it. And like, I'm a huge believer in like always, if you have a choice between two decks, play it as long as they're both like tier 1 or tier 2 decks. Play the one that you know the best, that you have the most playtime with, even if you think it's slightly worse objectively in the meta. So I ended up playing Cash, but Tri-Brigade Sprite was the only other deck I found that I kind of maybe would have wanted to play. But aside from that, like none of the other decks I tested could go better than 50-50 against Cash. I think because like the nature of Cash, it's like it's so inherently breakable, but like with non-engine cards like Evenly, Nib, like board breakers. But if the opponent doesn't see their non-engine, almost no deck can beat the full board. Even the lock 3, you know, which is the line that I usually go for. No deck can really beat that, except for like a few.
Okay.
So it's like, because decks, like, you're not always going to see your non-engine. It's just like, you just play Cash. Like, just the nature of the combo is just automatically going to win a good percentage of your games. So it just felt like a very strong baseline to play, and nothing else really felt quite as strong. So even though it wasn't like a perfect best deck, in my opinion, it was the best choice. Aside from maybe Tri-Brigade Sprite.
Like you said that it was obviously a flawed best deck. Like, you know, it was pretty risky to play. And like, did you feel like, you know, the only way you can really win with this deck is to really just play ahead of the whole quote unquote weakness curve of the deck? Because it's going through a cycle. You know, the
cycle, yeah.
Like the cycle being how people start their play and how people are countering how people are starting their play. How do you stay ahead of that curve?
Because like after Vegas, right, Dom won the event with like, and you know, their team won the event with like the full 5-zone lock, and that was where it kind of became popularized. And like after that, everyone's doing the 5-zone lock. It's crazy. Then people started maining Nib. So then it became like, oh, to play around Nib, people were just doing like Ariseheart pass. So then people started cutting Nib. So at the event, I generally as a rule do not respect Nib. I mean, I respect it in the sense of like, I know that's one of the main things I'm going to lose my games to, but I just think like, you have to put them on better habit. I don't think Ariseheart pass is like sufficient in the majority of the time. I don't think it really is correct. 'Cause it's like, if you do the full combo, you lose to Nib. But if you do Ariseheart pass, you lose to a single Book of Moon, a Kaiju, Infinite Impermanence, enemy controller, Tactics breaks your full board. If they top deck Gamma on their turn, Gamma beats Ariseheart. So like any single 1-for-1 spot removal card breaks your whole board because Ariseheart now is your full board. So I just don't think it's enough. I think you have to go for it and hope they don't have Nib, unfortunately. And interestingly, because Ariseheart pass had been gaining so much popularity over the prior weeks, I think a lot of people didn't main Nib, because I did not get Nib that much this weekend. And I think if people were more prepared for like full combo Cash players and played more Nib, I don't think we would have done as successfally.
I can agree with that. There was definitely a lot less main deck Nibs from what I've seen, and I was like, I watch every match.
I was like, how did I get this far? What the heck? Like, there was my one loss during the whole weekend was to a Flu player on day 1 who I think he game 1 even lead me, and then game 2 nibbed me, and I was like, you got me. There we go. Like, I've been waiting for that. Where's this now?
Okay.
And then I think in finals, I think I would have lost game 2 to a Nib, except I had Tactics, which fortunately my opponent turned on, which he didn't have to. It was an interesting situation, but I was able to Tactics a Nib because he used the Mole Rat, which was already under Dark Ruler, so he didn't have to use it. But he wants to make sure it got to Grave and didn't get banished later in the turn by an Ariseheart. He put it in Grave and just tributed it for quest with no effect. But that ended up turning on my Tactics, which is what let me hit his Nib.
Oh, you picked it out. Oh.
So that was interesting. So I would have gotten hit with Nib again in finals. I think there might have been a couple other times I got Nib throughout the weekend, but it was I also almost always, like, if I can, you know, get going first post side, I put it for Iblian. So I don't know how many games I would have gotten Nib or even lead, except for the fact that I Iblied them, because I Iblied at least like 3 people throughout the weekend. Iblied, and almost every game I've Iblied has just like won me those games. Ibli was a really good.
That's actually really something I want to talk about. In your deck list. You know, I'm gonna bring up your deck list right here, guys. If you guys want to see the deck list right here, you can just follow along. I'm just gonna leave it up there. You guys can read it yourself. But I'm not going to go through card for card because you've already done it on other channels as well, so you guys can definitely go check it out on YouTube. Give those guys the views if you guys want. Paulie giving the rundown of the deck profile. But looking at this list, there's several cards that I kind of want to ask you questions about, whether it be in the side deck or the main deck. First thing in the main deck is that you did not run Forbidden Lance. And I kind of wonder, why is that?
Yeah, so the way I built the main, I wanted every card in the main to be live, both going first and second, and also to be live as many games as possible. So Lance, like, it counters Imperm, it counters, like, the books, Econ, stuff like that. Tactics, if you end on a Ariseheart pass. Tactics, not so much if you're doing the full combo, because if they activate Tactics and you Lance one monster, then they can just take the other one. So, like, it's not that great versus Tactics when you're doing the full combo. And, like, I don't know, just, I played Lance for several weeks between Vegas and Cali, several regionals, and I just consistently found myself either setting it turn one and then never resolving it, and either having them, like, break my board with something else, like Nib, Kaiju, or just Engine. I don't know. I kept finding myself with it just set and it never got to really resolve, or going second where, like, it does nothing to help break a board. I didn't like it. Oh, there was a point, there was, like, 1 week where, like, Labyrinth, and when the week Traptrix came out, I was really supportive of maining it, because, like, I was like, all right, this is where, like, that was when, like, Labyrinth and Traptrix were both at their peak in terms of popularity.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, I definitely want to main Lance right now, but I ended up cutting it by the time Cali came around.
Does your deck struggle a little bit more against, like, the Traptrix deck if they go first?
Yeah, so definitely one concession I made, which I've had a lot. That's probably the most common question I've gotten about my list was, why didn't you play any Backrow removal on the side or the main? And it's like, to me, that's a concession you have to make, especially in, like, a bigger event. You have to play Swiss, and then you have to play Top Cut, and, like, so you have a whole extra set of rounds where you're most likely going to be playing mirrors and other, like, top tier decks, because you're going to be naturally facing more matches against meta decks because of Top Cut. It just becomes even more imperative to just side as much as possible for those decks and just make the concession of, you know what, there's a chance I might get knocked out early by a Backrow deck or by a Rogue deck, but you have to choose that trade-off of what you can't prepare for everything. And so to answer the people who keep saying, like, why didn't you play Spell and Trap removal? That's why. I really wanted to play Shifter because struggling a little bit with Math Mech leading up to the event, and also I knew Runic had been becoming popular, and Shifter is really good versus both those decks, so that's what I cut the Cosmic from the side for, was for the Shifters. And in the main, like I said, Lance I just hadn't been seeing as much Labyrinth, and Traptrix isn't really seeing play. And also the Labyrinth that I have been seeing, they're doing, like, they're trending more toward, like, the turn one, like, furniture combos where they, like, do the turn 0, like, Eradicator and stuff like that, to where, like, you're never even going to get to using spells on your turn. So
that makes sense.
I don't think Lance was correct for that event. Another quick note on what I said about wanting every card in the main to be live going first and second. That's why I chose to play a card like Econ over things like the Kaijus, which I really wanted to play, because I was concerned going second in the mirror. I have all these, like, board breaker spells like Tactics, Econ, Book, etc. But if they lock 5 me, none of those cards are going to work. So I almost wanted to play, like, a Kaijus, so that I had a way to counter the lock going second, as well as, like, if they chose the Ariseheart pass play, you know, Kaijus good against that too. But I ended up deciding, like, I really just don't want any cards in my main that when I go first are going to be dead in my hand, because this deck, like, the board is so breakable that, like, you need all your other remaining cards to be, like, live non-engine cards to, like, act as stops on their turn. I also made hand traps and sided more, so, like I said, if you have just one hand trap, that prevents them from doing the 5-zone lock, and then your board breaker spells are now going to be live on your turn. So in combination, it works pretty well, and it ended up working out well even without the Kaijus.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question. So this particular event really popularized the double Ariseheart play. Like you said, one Ariseheart kind of dies to a whole list of things, but putting up that second Ariseheart, like, what was your thought on that?
So, I never went for the double Ariseheart play myself, but in a way, I respect it because the play I do usually do is very similar. So, like I said, I don't usually do the lock 5 just because it's very difficult, and I don't like Ariseheart pass. So naturally, but what I usually do is the lock 3 play, which is just Ariseheart, Shangira, Diablos, and then, you know, you're locking 3, you're banishing from the deck with Diablos, and on your turn you summon Fender with the Shangira, unless it's a mirror. The value of the double Ariseheart play is it's what you do if you don't have enough pieces to do the full 5-zone lock, but you don't want to just pass on Ariseheart. So it's like a midway play. But to me, the lock 3 play is just as good of a midway play, because, like, the idea with double Arise is if they have, like, let's say a Book of Moon or one Kaiju, you still have a second copy. Ariseheart, Shangira, Diablos is very similar because it's in a way that, like, you're still putting up 2 threats that they have to deal with both. So if they have, like, one book or one Kaiju, like, for your Ariseheart, you, like, with the double Ariseheart line, you'll have an Ariseheart left. With my line, you'll have Shangira and Diablos and Fenrir left. So as soon as they use a monster effect, Fenrir triggers, and which triggers Diabolos, Shangri twice, and you lock the remaining zones, and now they have 5 zones locked and they can't play. So either both boards like present the same threat of like them needing at least like 2 board breaker cards or one like full wipe card like Eclipse or whatever. So they're very similar in that sense. I just feel like I like resolving Diabolos turn 1 because like sometimes taking a card from the extra deck can be relevant, and also just like banishing 7 from their main deck turn 1 instead of just 3. And to be honest, probably more like if they're gonna break your board, like there's a good chance they're gonna be with like an Eclipse and they're gonna out your whole field anyway. At that point, would I rather have 2 Arisehearts face down or like all my monsters face down and they lost extra cards from their deck? You know, I'd rather take away their resources guaranteed with Diabolos rather than just like not get any extra value if they do break my full board with like an Eclipse or something. But it's very marginal. Like both the double Ariseheart board and the lock 3 board are very similar midway boards that require them to have a certain amount of non-engine to break them. More so than just the single Ariseheart board. So I respect both boards, double Arise and block 3.
Okay, here's going into a bit of your play style, your mentality. This is going into games 2 and 3. Like how do you approach game 2 and 3?
Right.
With Kashtira in particular, it makes it even more sense to kind of know how to approach your game 2 and 3.
Right. Because like game 1, if you did a Ariseheart pass, maybe they won't put their nibs in game 2. But I always do full combo game 1, so I get what you're saying. Like right, like game 2, oh now you got to worry about nib. I think it's the same concept. You have to go for combos, especially post side. Like they're probably putting in kaijus and stuff. So if you do a Ariseheart pass, now it's even more likely they're gonna just easily break your board. So I still think you have to put them on better have the nib. I don't change that up. I think there was one game where I did a Ariseheart pass. I don't even remember if it was at Cali or at the regional week before the Philly regional, but I think I lost that game. So like every time I tried a Ariseheart pass, I've just lost the game. So I was like, all right, we're not doing this anymore. But one thing I do like post side is the Ibli. That's the main thing that's the only thing that really protects you from nib.
I love this tech.
Oh, Ibli's very good. Even at Vegas, where people were more prepared for it, and there were more people playing doubling Rebo, I still think it was really good. Because even like the 60-70% that were not playing doubling Rebo, or probably more than that, like it's so good against them that it's like, to me it was even then I liked it a lot. The downsides are like it makes you slightly vulnerable to Ash because it uses your normal. You can't do the normal combo where you go like special unicorn, search birth, normal Fenrir, because you've used your normal. So you have to go for like the Theosis line instead of birth. And if they Ash Theosis, it can be awkward for you. At that point, you have to have like an Ariseheart or at least some other 7 that you can summon to because you need to have a way to deal with the normal summon on their turn, so they can't just make a link too. So it can make you a little more vulnerable to hand traps, but it also counters the cards that you are the most vulnerable to in general, like Nib, even Imperm. It forces them to Imperm early, like before you've used your Unicorn or your Fenrir. So like you'll go special Unicorn, you don't use the effect yet. You normal Ibli, link 1, give them the thing. They're forced to Imperm at that point because in a second they're gonna have a card in the field. Well, not that copy, but like later on, if you can reborn like that, like a copy of Unicorn, now you can still use the effect. So it even plays on Imperm a little bit. And yeah, I think every game I believe throughout the weekend I won. I never ran into anyone playing doubling Rebo. I think the only deck still playing doubling at this point is Lab. I even thought about siding against the Flu player because I was like, I know he's mating evenly. If he's siding Nib, I'll put it in even if it's just those 6 cards in the deck. It's still worth it. And I didn't put it in, and then I got Nib game 2. I was like, oh. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the Ibli. Yeah, I'm actually surprised people stopped playing it over the past month. I don't know why it started losing so much play. I think mainly, like I said, just because of the fact that it takes your normal. But I think it was really good at the event. I'm still playing it now, even now, expecting people to start playing Ling more. I still haven't been seeing anyone really playing double Ling. If it weren't for Ibli, because you asked about like how do I like deal with and prepare like for post side like in the mirror and such.
Yeah.
I think in general going second in the mirror was better this format. Only a few players were like risk taking enough to like consistently go second in the mirror, but I do think going second was also Enzo. I don't know if you guys know Enzo Fallos, a really good player. Top 8'd like almost every regional like in a row this format with Cash. He won the 10 round Philly regional 2 weeks ago, and I spoke to him personally. He told me like, go second in the mirror. It's toward the end of the format, so I feel like I can say that freely now. But I think going second in general was better. At the event at Cali though, I did go first in most of my mirrors because of Ibli. If I was not playing Ibli, I would have won second post side.
So I want to ask you
I want to give
a
a quick
question.
shout out to Enzo too, because his insight was a lot of help in preparing for the event. Because I went to him as one of the most experienced Cash players I could think of to talk to, and definitely a big shout out to him.
My next question here is about matchups, like, you know, kind of the thought process here of like, which matchup did you think, like you thought that was gonna give you the most issue, and then which matchup actually became a problem matchup for you?
So, like I said, my one loss was to Flu, and it was to evenly in nib, like I said. I think in general, it's like, especially going first, Cash really beats most decks. It's just the non-engine that you lose to. So I can't really say any matches were particularly hard at the event. But I'll also say this, I somehow faced no Sprite at the event. I faced like, I don't even know, 8 mirrors, like up like 5 runics, and I never faced any Sprite. But Sprite is the deck that I think is the hardest matchup for Cash. Unironically, because going second, when they go second, they have so many hand traps. I actually do recognize hand traps as very problematic for Cash. In addition, it's not just board breakers, like hand traps as well can be very hard, especially like Droll sometimes, and Sprites often play Droll. And then when they go first, like it's so hard to beat a full Sprite board, especially if they play correctly. Sometimes you can if they don't use their stops correctly. I have won a lot of games, broken a lot of Sprite boards if they did use their stops in not the right spots. But if they play correctly, it's almost impossible. Without like something like Dark Ruler. Oh, even hand traps, they play through really well because of Carrot and Red. So Sprite is definitely Cash's hardest matchup this format.
I would say it's definitely the deck that is a safer choice when it comes to end boards and the ability to break boards. And like some people have already mentioned, I think I spoke with them while I was on the floor, and they said that, you know, Cash has so many weaknesses. Like you said, it's a very fragile deck, and Sprite seemed to be the less fragile deck of the two.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But interesting. Okay. I do know both of the Tri-Breed Sprite players who I know would play the event with that deck did both top with Kamal and Heist.
Kamal was like insane because Kamal's feature match really highlighted how strong Tri-Brigade Sprite was. When Raymond Dye, who played Pure Sprite, built his full board. I don't think Kamal interrupted him at all, but Kamal ended up breaking his whole board with just his cards. And
the deck was insane. I think because I helped I tested a lot with Hani, and Kamal was the one who built the deck, and I tested with him as well a lot, and he was like consistently beating me like in testing with that deck. That's why I almost played it.
Yeah, it was so strong watching him perform, and that's why. I think in my previous video when I was talking about like, you know, meta trends from, you know, 250th YCS, I was like, of all the Sprite deck that I think is good, I think the best one was Tri-Brigade Sprite. Yeah, simply because of Kamal versus Raymond. And both of them are like top tier contenders, like two titans clashing against each other. The guy builds full board, gets his full board smashed and lost control, and there's no comeback. Thanks for all of that. Now let's get into some questions about the future. You know, some of your insights for the future now. Do you look into future decks or like study like new formats that are coming around the corner?
I don't look too far ahead. Like, you know, there's some players who love like as soon as something's announced in the OCG, like they're talking about it. They're like, "Oh, have you seen like this new? Like, did you hear about such? What do you think of such and such deck?" And I'm like, "What? Like what deck? Like what? A mana what? Mana don't what?"
Yeah, mana don't.
Definitely, I certainly don't sit down for the weekend. New cards come out and try to learn them. Then I 100% prepare ahead of time. Usually like one event ahead, like whatever the next event is and whatever the format's going to be for that event. That's what I like focus on. So for example, like leading up to Cali. My friend Brad, the one I talked about, my testing partner, he's been focusing a ton for like SIAC format for the past like month and a half. He's been working on the decks. So like but I was like, I can't worry about that yet. I gotta focus on Cali. So I told him I'm not gonna be learning any of the new stuff until after Cali. And so today I finally sat down and literally today started learning all the new SIAC decks. So yeah.
Okay.
They're pretty cool.
So which SIAC deck do you think has the most interest for you right now?
I don't know yet. I definitely know I don't know them well enough yet to be able to give an educated opinion on it.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm gonna throw one curveball question here.
For sure.
Ban list wise, which card do you think deserves to be on a ban list? You know, coming from your perspective.
Dimensional Barrier. I think like in general. Yeah, in general, Flood. It's interesting because people probably expect me to say like something that belongs to one of the current decks, right? But it's like I'm generally of the belief it's like I don't know. Decks come and go. It's like there's always gonna be a best deck. So yeah, Cash is good, but like I don't really see it like, oh, this deck's super broken, it needs to be banned. To me, it's more about like rotation. It's like once deck's had its time, 3 months, you know, it's time to go. But what I really feel, the thing I care more about is like specific cards that I just feel are unfair. And the main category of card that I have an issue with philosophically is floodgates in general, and especially floodgates that create lingering effects that can't even be interacted with like cosmic or your spell trap removal. Yeah, I'm not a fan of cards that like decrease the amount of interaction in the game. Like
post Red Reboot ban, of course, D Barrier. I'm guessing you're probably not a fan of the Harpy's Featherstorm either.
No, that would probably be the second card in the same category. Like if I had to name 2 cards, that'd probably be the other one.
I'm not a big fan of Gimmick Puppet myself.
That's another great one. That's probably the worst one of all, because that one is a floodgate effect that is a lingering effect.
It doesn't activate.
And also doesn't activate, so you can't even legally change the activate. At least Barrier, you could like theoretically Red Reboot if that was legal, or like negate with like carrot or some form of like
Yeah.
negation. Like gimmick up, it just comes down. You can't even chain to it.
Yeah.
And expulsion has almost no ways to interact with it even.
Thank you, Paulie, for coming onto the channel and kind of giving
Thank
us
you.
a full
That was
interview. How to play like a YCS champion. I mean, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button. Look for this handsome dude at the next event.
And also, just real quick, if anyone wants to contact me or reach out, feel free to reach out. It's at Paulie Aronson on Twitter and Paulie Aronson on Facebook. That's where Facebook's my main platform. And yeah, also if anyone's interested in, I've recently begun working with some players with coaching. If anyone's interested in coaching or wants to work together, feel free to reach out and or even work together for content. You know, trying to get out there in the community. So yeah.
And if this video is any insight to that, look, you're like super detailed oriented when it comes to like explaining all of that stuff.
Yes.
And think about it as a little bit of a taste of coaching. All right. And well, if I got nothing else to add, well, that's all I got for this video. If you guys enjoyed, smash that thumbs up button, hit subscribe, ding that notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next
Thank you guys. Take care.